guys, Erin here. So I recorded a 2-part podcast about the 8 limbs of yoga. Now this is something I've discussed before, but gosh, it has been quite a few years since I've talked about the 8 limbs of yoga. I've been studying and practicing yoga and continually challenging and growing for almost 20 years now. So my perspective has changed on a lot of the meanings of these limbs as well as application into life. So I thought, you know what, let me revisit this. So it's at least going to be a 2-part podcast. It might be a 3. And I'm going to start you off with this first one, which I discuss the ethics, which is the Yamas, the first limb of yoga. So I hope that you enjoy. By the way, if you love yoga and if you're curious about India, I'm doing a 2-week immersion. I only have 6 spots left for this India immersion. It was from June 14th to the 28th. You arrive the 13th, you leave the 29th. I rented out the whole shala. You'll learn yoga therapy, Ayurveda. We have a sattvic private chef, and she's going to be serving yogic diet, so losing inflammation in your body, feeling energized. And my Kalari Payattu teacher is going to be there. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be teaching yoga, asana, as well as yoga sutras. So if you're interested in that, reach out to Erin at erincoach.com, and I will see you soon. All right. Thank you. Namaste. Hello, welcome back to Thrive Yoga Fit Transformational Coaching. This is Erin. Hello, everyone. I have missed you. I have been so busy. I took a job working underneath Tim Goyech in addition to all the other things that I do, but I love what I do. I believe in him. I believe in the things that he does. He was just on this podcast. So obviously I like him at least a little bit. And, life just kind of took me away, and we had yoga teacher training start, and I forget what else, but a bunch of things. And tomorrow is my birthday. So life just keeps happening and rolling. And so I missed last week. I apologize. And then, Friday came rolling around. I was like, not another week without a podcast. And I've been wanting to revisit the 8 limbs of yoga. So I was like, well, let me get on and do something. So hi, how are you? How's it going? So real quick, if you're listening to this podcast and you have been listening for a while, if you have not left a review, come on. I am trying to get 200 reviews for my birthday, and I'm at about 161. If you wouldn't mind leaving a review and just give me some love, that does help other people to find me and these holistic healing modalities that I talk about, spirituality, and then all the other yummy things I talk about. So if you're enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving a review. It is literally the cheapest and quickest and best way that you can support the podcast. So thank you very much. All right, so 8 limbs of yoga. So if you're listening to this podcast, if you have been for any length of time, either you're a yogi or you're interested in yoga, and either or both is okay. Or maybe you're just yoga curious. But even if you don't want to put on a pair of yoga pants and walk inside of a yoga studio to do asana practice, totally get it, you will still be interested in this podcast, I think, because the 8 limbs of yoga go way beyond the postures. In fact, the postures are just one limb of 8, and there's many different pieces of each of the 8 limbs that I'm going to go into. So Ashtanga. Ashtanga is the 8 limbs. That's what it means. Ashtau is 8, Anga is limb. So 8 limb practice. So it's 8 branches or 8 limbs. And the 8 limbs of yoga are Yamas, Niyamas, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So each of these 8 limbs, you could say they're rungs, like on a ladder. That's how some people refer to them. Or you can think of them as branches. And I say they can be both. So it's something that you learn piece by piece. And then as you learn one piece, you're like, yes, okay, I have this one piece. Let me add another piece. Let me add another piece. And just keep going. Like my healing practice. I know so many different modalities because I've been in service for almost 20 years. And I know I'm just about to turn 40 tomorrow. Yay! And people say, wow, you know so much at so young. Well, maybe I have the gift of karma from a past lifetime, but I I had a childhood where I had to figure out things pretty quickly because I was one of five. My mother was exhausted and bipolar, and we grew up in the ghetto, so I had to figure out my life pretty quick, or I get my ass beat, or I wouldn't have money to eat, so I had to figure out things. So as a result, I'm a pretty adaptable human being and business owner, and I found yoga on my path where I was trying to figure things out. And so, piece by piece, these things come together. So yoga can present itself in rungs or branches. So eventually I think that as you learn the pieces, then you start using them at the same time. Sort of like in Harry Potter, you start with one spell and then you start to learn many and you get a hold of things. So that's like anything, I think. So you learn one technique, you start with it, and then once you ground into that one, then you can add another. I'm currently learning Malayalam because I want to talk with my Kalari Payattu teacher, and I think he's learning English. I don't know because we chat a lot through WhatsApp, and it seems like his English through the translation is getting better. Either that or maybe he paid for an app. But either way, I'm learning Korochu Malayalam. So if you speak Malayalam, reach out to me. Let's exchange. So the 8 limbs of yoga. So the 8 limbs, the first two, the Yamas and Niyamas, are our ethics and observances. And the Yamas are said to be sort of outward to more inward. And then the Niyamas are more of an inward to deeper inward experience. So the first 5, or the 5 of the Yamas are Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. So Ahimsa means love and reverence for all things, or not to harm, non-harm towards anything, non-killing, non-harming. So I like the first definition I gave, which is from Nishala Joy Devi's translation of the Yoga Sutras. I love the Yoga Sutras. That is my main spiritual text. I read it every night before bed. I read different versions. I have about 15 different translations. Lately, I've been visiting Edwin Bryan's translation, and I actually am starting to like it more. It's actually, when I first visited it, it was kind of dry, but now it's been growing on me. So love and reverence for all things. It's different. So non-harming something is one thing. And then love and reverence for all things has a different energy to it, doesn't it? So when I think of a yogi that really has been doing their practice, I think of someone that's not just stoic and neutral, like maybe not necessarily doing any harm, but they're not necessarily doing any good either. I actually think of, when I think of a yogi, I think of someone who is kind. I think of someone who, when you're in their presence, you want to sit at their feet and learn something because you think, this person has something figured out. They have something, and there's a sort of silent strength and happiness to them. Let me learn from them. And also the mark of an experienced yogi, I have found, is one with humility. So great strength, but humility. And the same thing with martial artists too. The best martial artists are just, they could do incredible things, but they have a certain level of humility. So that is Ahimsa, and the first rung or branch of the Yamas and Niyamas. The second is Satya. So Satya means truthfulness. And truthfulness is... my definition of what truthfulness is has slightly shifted. So sometimes it is appropriate to not explain 100% of what is true. And the reason being is that sometimes you need to withhold information depending on who you're dealing with. Let's say a child. So let's say you need to explain in a certain way something like a big complex concept to a child, but they might not be at the appropriate age to learn those things. So Satya is like truthfulness, but it in the appropriate context at the appropriate time with the grounding of ahimsa, love, reverence, and respect for all living things. I think this is important, and this is where we sort of build from one yama to the next yama, because if we just like wildly tell the truth, like, oh, I'm brutally honest, well, that's not compassionate, right? And the thing is, with truth is, if people aren't open to receiving it, what good is the truth? Do you know what I mean? Especially if you're in a relationship with someone. So let's put this into context. In a relationship with someone, and you just tell them straight up all the things that, you see in their behavior, and you're not very nice about it. You're not like mean about it. You're kind of neutral. That can be hard for them to hear, and maybe not all at once, please. So this is me speaking from the space of being in a conscious relationship and conscious friendships. So, you have to pace yourself a little bit. We're all human. We have emotions, and I think that comes in with the love and reverence, like respecting, honoring, and looking at, we are divine beings, but we have real human emotions and feelings, and so satya, the definition is truthfulness, but it's also like in the appropriate time, in the appropriate levels. Hopefully that makes sense. The next yama is asteya. So asteya means non-stealing, or you can sort of flip it and reverse it like Missy Elliott, and it can mean generosity. I really like the generosity because, okay, are we that really challenged ethically that we don't think, okay, don't steal a thing. Okay, got it. Oh, that's bullshit. So asteya, I like the definition of generosity because it's one thing not to steal. Okay, that's not yours. Don't take it. It's another thing to be generous. To be generous takes a certain faith that more is coming. And generosity also procures an attitude of prosperity. And, in the next yama, we talk about non-excess, or, not overdoing, not accumulating. And then in the yama after that, non-hoarding or non-greed, or only taking what you need. We can see how these limbs would build on one another. So generosity is important because it fosters non-attachment, vairagyam. So if you're generous with the things that you have, you know that you're not those things, and if you're generous with something that people need, you're going to spread kindness, spread love, and like sometimes life's hard for people. I know that we talk about neutrality and how it's our perspective that makes things challenging. I get that, and mindset is certainly something that we want to address. But it's much harder to have a good mindset when you can't eat, you can't afford to pay your rent. So having generosity is an important part of being a yogi. I did a facial analysis today with a wonderful mother and daughter, and the mother, I could tell that she was like pulling her pennies to afford the formulas I was selling. And I was like, listen, you need this formula. I'm just going to give it to you for free. And she's like weeping tears of joy. And it's like, to me, it just made sense. If you see that somebody can't afford something, like buying their coffee, paying it forward, like doing something like that as much as we can, I think it's important on the ethical path to be generous if we can, right? So sometimes we need to, if things are tight, we just need to, we only have what we have, but still then being generous if we can, I think is important on the path. So then our next one is brahmacharya, which can also mean celibacy, but I like to think of it as using restraint with your vital force. This is one that I struggled with, having been adrenal fatigued twice and almost a third time. And then I hit the brakes and realized, oh, I need to have days off. Oh, I need to have active rest. Oh, I need to nourish myself properly. So having this attitude of not overdoing it and of having a sort of balance in your life and maintaining your vital force helps you to direct it properly to serve. Having been adrenal fatigued, a couple of times, and once very severely, so talk from that perspective. If you don't have enough vital force within you, prana shakti, then you can't even process your emotions. I mean, for me, it was so bad, I could barely get out of bed and shower. And then just by showering, I would be exhausted for a couple of hours and I'd have to sleep. And it was just after a very traumatic thing that happened in my life, which I've talked about on many, many podcasts, but I won't talk about it on this one. And, I needed to really learn, I guess the hard way, how precious it is. Because if you've been sick before, you cherish your health. Or that's the hope, at least. So Brahmacharya invites us to use restraint with our energy. Like, so what if you get FOMO? Say no sometimes. Like, you don't have to do all the things. And you need to be, considerate of your energy, and you need to use discernment. If, for example, if I have yoga teacher training the next day, I'm not going to go out super late because I know I'm not going to perform as well. And my students trust me. They trust me that I'm going to manage myself. And that's something that took me a few years to really get. Like when people put down tuition money and they sign up for one of my courses, they are trusting me that I'm going to manage myself, that I'm going to manage my time, that I'm going to keep up with my spiritual practices, that, I'm going to take care of myself so that when I bring it, I fucking bring it. And for those of you who are one person that reached out to me and said, oh, I love your beautiful spirituality podcast, but then you said the F word, and then I was just, get over yourself. It's a word, and I use it as a little relish. I don't think I overdrop it. So anyways, Brahmacharya, very important ethic, teaches us to use restraint with our energy, our vital force, so that we can channel it and we can direct it. The next yama, the final yama, is aparigraha, and this is non-greed, or only taking what you need. When I heard this, and I'm always reading different definitions of the Yoga Sutras, and the Yamas and Niyamas come from the Yoga Sutras. So when I heard that definition of only take what you need, I instantly thought of Thanksgiving and just having like an extra biscuit. Do I need that? Hell no. And that could also flirt with the idea of non-excess. But non-hoarding, I think we can take it in a different direction. I'm going to take it in the direction of non-hoarding. Sometimes we hold on to things that we just don't need. And then what happens is, because of our attachment to that thing, it collects dust, it takes up space in our house, and then we need to get a bigger house because we can't afford all the things. I'm looking at all the books on my shelf. I probably don't need all of those, but books are so hard to give away. So aparigraha invites us to, again, like use discernment and question, non-greed, like, do I need all these things? Can I give them away? Are they taking up a lot of like mental and emotional real estate? So if we think about this as applied to our emotions and our mind, like what are you holding on to in your mind? What are you hoarding in like the ghostly caverns of your mind that maybe you can let go of? So aparigraha invites us to question that. Again, all of this comes down to discernment, using your viveka and your vitarka, which is your reasoning capabilities of your mind. And a yogi and a really good martial artist, practices this because they're challenging themselves on their mat, doing these crazy poses, or even just like advanced breath work, or maybe just trying to still their mind. And to do that, you have to be with yourself, and to be with yourself, you have to constantly solve problems. So your discernment is sharpened as you do that. So that is our 5 yamas. That's the first limb of yoga. Now we go on to the second limb.
Thank you so much for listening. If you want to support the podcast and if it's helping you, please consider writing a review. You can go to iTunes or Google Play, go into the search bar and type in Thrive Yoga Fit Transformational Coaching, scroll down, and you can leave a review. This helps other people to find me as well as bumps us up in the search ratings. Also, this podcast is sponsor-free, so that means we don't receive anything for doing it. If you feel so inclined and this podcast is helping to support you and you want to return the favor and help to support any production costs of the podcast, feel free to give a donation to a Venmo link, Thrive Yoga Fit, or PayPal, Erin@erincoach.com. If you don't have the means, don't worry about it. We're not going anywhere. You're all good. But if you would like to give back, you can give back in those ways. Thank you so much. Namaste.